Burgess Model, also known as the Concentric Model, written about or published in 1925. So it imagines the city as a series of circles, or what do you call this, concentric zones, the center being the business district. And then as you go out, you have more and more expensive housing. So the yellow here will be the central business district. The red here will be like the main industrial zone, followed by low income housing, medium income housing, and then high end housing. And then the sector model, which is shown over here. I think I'll just use this visual aid. It's a lot better. Okay. So the sector model shown over here tries to describe cities that don't radiate perfectly from a center, but describe cities that have a sort of transportation corridor that intersects it. And then you can see that the business district is still there. And along the transportation district, you have really next to it like high income housing, because the land values are very high near to transportation zones, followed by low class residential, sort of close to the business district, but sort of like in between gaps in development where there would be high income and medium income development. So this is like more randomized, and it's really based on like patterns are heavily based on the geography of the city, as well as different like socioeconomic what do you call this, factors, like maybe this land has some history, that's why it's becoming medium income. Maybe this land, usually high income, would be mostly kind of based on accessibility to the transportation zone and the what do you call this, the main or the central business district. And the low income residentials are located, they just fill in the gaps, basically where no high income or middle income families are living. That's where they usually develop, but they usually tend to stay close to the business district because that's where they are working. And then finally, we have the multiple nuclei model, which basically describes how traditionally, or like what do you call this, previously concentric cities have developed further outward. So this is sort of the beginning of urban sprawl. So you have the business district over here. And then number 2 is the manufacturing or industrial sites. Number 3 is low-class residential near the business districts because they don't have access to private transportation. So they have to like walk or live as close as possible to where they work. You have here as number 6 as heavy manufacturing industrial areas, again, close to the low residential areas. The high-end areas or like middle income areas are over here, basically in between the low income and the high income. And then number 7 over here are outlying business districts, basically new centers for business. So in the article over here, I described some examples. So we can see concentric models in older cities typically. So if you look at London, so they bring up London, UK. And then I turn off the super detailed map. I'll just look at the simplified map. So you notice the main center or the oldest district in what do you call this, London, is still in the center and it radiates outwards. This is very definitely based on the geography of London. We don't have the 3D here. Let me see, London contour, London geography, 3D. Okay. So typically these older cities start out in flat valleys. View 3D map on Google Earth website. Close this. So while that's loading, you can clearly see if I just turn off the labels here, satellite, more labels are off. Okay. Oh, excuse me. So you can really tell that the city developed next to this river over here. Let's see. Let me see if I can guess the oldest district. Probably somewhere over here. This looks like a city hall of some sort. So this is residential. Let's see, London City Hall. Okay, it's somewhere over here. So next to a major transportation hub, the London like train station. And if I switch to 3D, you can really tell that this is where the main business district is. You have all the high-rise buildings over here, and gradually it tapers downwards as you go further away from the city center. And then let me just switch again to the simplified version. Like, I don't know what you call this. The default Google Maps. And you can clearly see the road patterns radiating outward from a center, and then gradually becoming less and less dense as you go out. So another example I highlighted was Rome, Italy. Then very clearly you can see the centralized, the concentric pattern, starting out here where you have in the city center, you have the Colosseum, you have the bunch of basilicas, the Roman Forum, and where is I just try to locate the Rome City Hall. Typically in older cities, the city hall is just located in the center of the city. This one is Rome City Hall, the fourth Rome City Hall, probably. It's further away from the city. I don't know what they call their main city hall, but you can see here the train station, a big terminal over here. So I'm gonna guess the city hall is somewhere in this area, although no, I'm not 100% sure. But again, you can see that pattern of development over here. Okay, next, an example of a, what do you call this? A sectoral development. So sector model over here. Let's see, I forgot what I wrote. What did I write? Okay, here we go. I don't know how to pronounce this. Loading, never mind. Pronunciation. Oh, there it goes. That's much better. But yeah, typically these older cities are flat. Okay. Let me just get the pronunciation for this. Mochenberdankak. Let me try.
Feiertagsmagazin drückt den Jungs die
Is this
Daumen.
ads?
Morgen beim Spiel gegen Mönchengladbach, das will wieder mehr.
We're about to meet Jan Sommer, the goalkeeper of Borussia Mönchengladbach,
To see if the players
Mochenganschlenbach. Anyway, so let's take a look at that city over here. Da-da-da. And then you can see the transportation corridor, like adjacent, like it could have been this one over here. You see another train station in the center, and then like highways along the western side of the city. So this is very interesting because I'm gonna guess that this area of Germany is also very flat. Yes, so if you look at that, it's typically flat. So this is another type of development where I think very likely either the transportation corridor, very likely that the transportation corridor came first and then the settlers came in. So this would describe sort of like a satellite city. So let me see here. We zoom out even further. If you look at Brussels here, it's following the concentric pattern. It's probably, I'm going to guess that Mönchengladbach is a satellite city of Cologne over here. So Cologne still has the concentric concentric sort of model, and then Mönchengladbach. Mönchengladbach has what do you call this? A sectoral model. And also notice the development period. So the concentric model was developed in 1925. The sectoral model was developed in 1939. So it's following sort of this pattern where newer cities are sprouting out, and then they get documented and described by a urban growth model. So the sectoral model is developed by an economist called Homer Hewitt. And then, yeah, this is basically his observation of how cities developed in the 1930s. So very likely, cities with the sectoral sort of pattern develop after or develop around an existing city with the concentric pattern. Okay, and then finally, we have the multiple nuclei model, which we can sort of describe is what happens with Cebu City. Because geographically, Cebu City is an island and a very, what do you call this, hilly or like mountainous island at that. The original concentric model, let's see here, started out over here with the fort and the what do you call this, the Spanish colony, spread out to become a sectoral model with the train station. Let me just go back to my article over here. Load. Sort of transformed into the sectoral development with the new train station in the 1900s. And then when the train station was demolished, it became closer to a, what they call this, a multiple nuclei model. So we have the original core here, the original business district. During the 1600s, it would have been bounded by this river over here, the Parian Estero, basically the Parian River, which is now built up and covered by like malls and like the Colon area. And then the new business center is very clearly Ayala, or like IT Park. And then you can even classify the Mandaue City and Talisay City as new centers of growth. So it's becoming that multiple nuclei sort of model. And then over here, just like go to the, I think modules will be faster. If we look at the multiple nuclei model, it's really following that pattern. And these models were made at different times, trying to describe or like record what was going on in cities from the 1920s all the way to the 1940s. So that's only like 20 years of development compared to like the thousands of years of development in like prehistory, like a pre-industrial age. So you can really feel the like rapid development of cities, not just in Europe or Western countries, but also in Eastern countries like Asia, Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, all that. So why did I want to discuss this is because now that we have sort of like a baseline looking at Cebu City and Manila, I'll probably like make a module on Manila as well. As to how cities develop, we can better anticipate or plan for future like additions to our respective cities. So for Puerto Princesa, what would be the development pattern like? In Ormoc, what would it be like? In Tacloban, what would it be like? Okay. So this brings us to our activity for this evening. Let me see here. I still need to make the module for it, but let me leave student view. Let's look at your submissions. So building upon your submissions for the midterms, I think over here, we already like wrote down or tracked the boundaries. We already have like the boundary of our different cities. You have Ormoc over here. You track the issues, the problems, and the opportunities. So now let's try to sort of record the pattern of development, or try to guess what kind of pattern or what kind of development pattern is our individual cities using. So let's take a look at this is um, let's look at municipality of Jimenez. Jimenez. Do-do-do, do-do. Okay. So maybe the whole municipality will be a bit too difficult to draw because there's a lot of lines. But maybe if you draw it at like this scale, just get the major roads. So if you draw it at this scale, you can clearly see that Jimenez Municipal Hall is still observing that concentric development. Not Jimenez, Jimenez Municipality is still observing that concentric development. So based on our discussion, more likely it will go through either a pattern of sectoral development and then into a multiple nuclei development. So let's see here. We have a bus terminal over here. This could become a, what do you call this? This is a bus terminal. And are these like water tanks?
Yeah, depot, sir. Gasoline.
Ah, okay. Is this a private property? Oh, yeah, it is. Petron. Ah, okay. Why does it say one terminal? Oh, Petron Jimenez Terminal. Ah, okay. So it's a depot. So this could be a possible expansion zone or like a new nuclei. So if you see here, there are already some residential developments over here. I think these lands are for agriculture. It looks like agricultural lands, yes. So I think these are important to preserve. There might be some pressures from private developers to use this land because developers I don't know if you have a Cebu Land Masters, but developers really want to convert basically any kind of green land or like agricultural land into commercial because it typically means more money. But there should be policies in place to protect these kinds of lands, especially since the Philippines is having problems with food scarcity and food production. So maybe your city, your municipality, Jimenez, could be one of the kanang, or if it's not already, one of the food producers, not just for what they call this area, not just for Region 10, but probably the whole country as well. So preserving that agricultural land, I think, would be a number one sort of goal in local comprehensive land use plans or policy. And then you have some developments over here. I think someone wanted to say something. Wala ra? Ah, okay. But yes, this is why I think I really want to discuss more on these growth patterns or these development patterns. And then I didn't have time to write it all down, but I started off with a summary of all three. And then I'm already beginning to finish up the second and third sort of models. But you can just go ahead and watch these videos. They're more like abstract, more like US based. So hopefully my modules will fill in the gaps of making it more Filipino based. Anyway, your our like activity going towards finals will be to track down the or like draw. Does everyone have AutoCAD here? Yes, you can raise your hand if you have AutoCAD or
Yes,
whatever.
sir.
Okay, so I have one over here. It's just to like give you a sample of like what I'm thinking our output will be. Do the pedestrianization, do Osmeña Boulevard. I think this one would be this one. So this one is a bit detailed, but you can make something a little bit less detailed. So you can just put up your AutoCAD. ignore the sort of references, and just basically get the major roads. You don't need to draw the buildings, just like the pattern. So this is like very this is focused on the older district of Cebu. This is the Colon area. But maybe for our finals, we can just focus on like a scale like this. It's maybe 1:100,000 or something like that. I'll take a snip of this. We'll just draw the built up areas and maybe have like a key plan for the whole municipality. The Jimenez urban area. Okay. And then if your municipality already has a map for it, feel free to use it. And you can just like put in like more, so you can spend more time analyzing the area. So let me just reduce opacity. Oh, excuse me. Of course, try to make it to scale. I forgot to include the scale bar over here. But just to like show you guys what I want us to do, we'll probably like, this will be our final activity. We'll have some lectures in between. So while we're having the lectures, we could spend some time drawing this. Insert raster. Downloads. See. I can't find my downloads. This PC. There we go. Open. Okay. So here we go. That's what I was trying to find. So maybe just a simple like this. It's like estimate. Doesn't have to be super perfect. Just so that you can see the different roads and just the pattern of development. So maybe something like that. And then copying that. And then just copying that over and over again. Interestingly, I just noticed for Jimenez, there's a very kind of well-preserved grid pattern. So you can also describe maybe, if you want, like when was the city founded? So let's look at, we can easily Google that. Jimenez Municipality. Founded. Oh, exactly 1900, April 7. So that's probably why it has this, it was able to maintain this grid pattern. Most likely due to American planners working with Manila and like the national government, just prescribing the grid pattern. Because really, again, as we described like a few weeks ago, the grid pattern has divides land equally and solves problems about fairness. So typically you can have equal sized blocks, and the center would be where the church and the municipal hall is, with the central plaza and then a few business districts around it, and then residential areas going further away. Let me see here. You can also like describe what are the main, what do you call this? Activities, not really activity, economic activities. Like, are they, what is your main production? Are you, I think based on this map, I think it's really agriculture is the main sector in this area. Whereas in Cebu City, the main sector is like the commercial sector, BPOs, and a bunch of industrial facilities near the city center. So over here, let me just open up Cebu City. So these are industrial zones over here. So you can see the factories, you can see the port, and then meanwhile in Mandaue City, you have something similar, but they're still like agricultural areas. So there's still like food production over here. And then some more like industrial areas. So you see gas tanks, Petron again. Meanwhile, Lapu-Lapu is really all about tourism. So across the beaches over here, this is where the beaches in Cebu province are. So you have a bunch of resorts. And then further away where there are no resorts, you have residential areas. And then in between sort of the resorts and the residential areas are smaller commercial areas. And basically you can see that high-end residential areas have like better like grid. This looks like socialized housing actually, or like middle income housing. So you can see that middle income housing is here. You can very clearly see it if you turn off the satellite. So you can see this development is like subdivisions, and then you can just sort of see the row of like hotels over here. And I think airports are classified as industrial zones, or is it like institutional zones or like commercial? I need to clarify that. And then in between where the middle income and the high income families residential areas are, you have the low income housing. So something like this, and then informal settlers around that. So the idea being, at least in the 1930s to 1940s, low-income housing typically locates to where the the economic activities are, because they didn't have the mode of transportation. But if you can see here in Lapu-Lapu City, probably because of the popularity of jeepneys and what they call this, the motorcycles, the CCADs, you can basically live anywhere where the land isn't valuable and then be able to get to the places you need to work. So I think that's one sort of advantage / disadvantage of the Philippines. Our public transportation can get to all the nooks and crannies of our land. So that helps with, I guess, population growth, but it doesn't help so much with the development of quality housing. So it seems, I think it's very apparent in the Philippines that, what do you call this, informal settlement is almost encouraged, because you can basically live anywhere as long as people don't stop you. You can make a shed house, and yeah, you can just squat. So it's a combination of a lack of proper housing and the ease of just like building up your own shack house anywhere. Enforcement could also be a problem, and that is why we have a lot of informal settlements. So let's take up, before we end this discussion, I'll fill in the other modules. And then after I fill in those modules, we'll probably have like a quick activity. And then you can probably get started on our finals activity as well. Or is it not going to Manila? I think it's lagging. Anyway, so with Manila, it first grew out from one of the biggest, or like, well, most preserved Spanish forts in the Philippines, where is Intramuros. Let me just refresh this. Intramuros is somewhere over here. So it started out with the Intramuros, the fortified city, and then the new Nuclei, or the new business center, became Binondo. Where is Binondo? Manila, Binondo. So that is that area over there. So basically just across the river. So this is like a, I can't remember if it was like Chinese. Most likely it was Chinese, because the Spanish were living here. And then the Spanish and the Chinese typically usually didn't get along. So that's why they're across the river. And that's why the fortification is here. And they have the Jones Bridge over here. I think the other bridges weren't constructed yet. I think this is like 1500s, 1600s up until the Industrial Revolution. And some of the lecturers I've heard say that this bridge here was strategically located so that in case there would be some kind of revolution or civil unrest from the Chinese population of Manila, the fortified city over here could basically just open fire on this bridge, basically like protecting itself from any kind of insurrection or something like that. So yeah. So this became sort of the new business center in the 1900s. I think the new business district is now further outwards. So we could probably just Google Manila Business District. Manila Business District. is now Makati CBD. So I'll just try to locate this. Makati CBD. Makati CBD. Now over here, a bit more southern and a bit further away. I think this pattern, I need to show you the maps because I have all these images in my head, but I can't put it on screen. I think very likely in Manila, this area got developed post-World War II. And then this area over here was still greenfield. So kind of like how Ayala in our module over here became the new sort of business district in the 1900s of Cebu. Even earlier than that, the Makati CBD probably Ayala is like 1990s, so Makati CBD could probably be even earlier, like 1950s. So I'll go over here. Okay, wait for that image to load. So the business district or the former business district of Cebu City was here in San Roque, and it moved up here to like the capital area. And then after that, it went to the Lahug Ayala area over here. This is a Barangay Camputao, Barangay Luz. So this is like Cebu IT Park is over here. Ayala is over here. Excuse me. And then typical to the pattern of concentric development, high-end subdivisions started sprouting out further away. So over here in Banilad, and then over here, especially in Guadalupe. And then the middle income would be right in the middle between the high-end and the business districts. And then the gaps between the middle income and high-income housing became the quote-unquote undesired locations, ripe for the taking for informal settlers and low-income housing. So this will be interesting to discuss and see what could be the future of your cities if left kanang unmanaged, because very likely, or like I'm 90% sure that why this happened in Cebu City because we had a plan, a comprehensive land use plan up until 1970, which was never updated or renewed until today. So that's over 50 years of unplanned development. And basically to save your municipalities and cities from the fate of what's happening in Cebu and Manila is really no choice but to have proper land use planning. So this is where your urban design and urban planning comes in. And I'm hoping to get this modules done by next week is we discuss the CLUP, basically the end of our infrastructure lecture, and we're moving on to the governance and economics part of the issues of urban design and urban planning. And then, yeah, that will be our projection or like schedule of activities from now until end of November. And then in December, we'll like finish up our maps and really go into like street design. And that will be the kanang sort of our like culmination activity for this class. So basic street standards. And then hopefully I can share with you updates to my own project which is focusing in this area over here. Colon or like Barangay San Roque and Barangay Santo Niño in Cebu City. So yeah, that's basically it. So just review the modules. I'll be filling them in like from now until like 9. And then I'll be checking your quiz answers over here. And then also you can get started on making your like basic maps for your urban areas. Okay. Okay, we have here. The DHSUD is currently consolidating data on informal settlers, families per person, a good step to addressing the housing backlog. Yes, very good. Okay, stop recording.